Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. I'm Fahima Mohammed, your host and relationship coach. We are once again here on the Single Muslim Live show, and I would like to welcome all of you from all of us here on British Muslim TV, from wherever you're watching and streaming, whether it's live on Sky Channel 752, Facebook or Twitter. A very, very warm welcome. We have another amazing guest with us tonight discussing a topic which we do come again and again across, and I think it's important because it's such a prevalent topic. So we need as many different, opinions and guests from their perspective, and inshallah that we have no different for tonight, where they'll be sharing their professional sort of insights onto this topic of living after divorce. You can definitely get involved. Tell us your story, give us your comments or any questions that you have for myself or my guest tonight. And you can do so by calling in live directly to the studio on 01924 231 Please do ask the bill payer's permission, as standard network rates do apply. We also have a free WhatsApp service where you can send in your messages anonymously, which I can read out as well to my guests. And you can also, again, have any sort of your comments, share any of your stories. And that number is 07585 Now, we have a really amazing guest, as we do every weekend tonight, no different, and all the way from Auckland in New Zealand, we have Sajda Alvi. Assalamu alaikum, Sajda.
Walaikum salam, Sister Faima.
So nice to see you today, and all the way from New Zealand. You're already on a Friday morning. Thank you so much for your time, and it's really early, and also for giving us your actual sort of like time to be with us today. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on.
It's our pleasure. Now, for our viewers, could you please tell us firstly a little bit about yourself and your work, and a little bit about what you do as well?
So, hello everyone. My name is Sajida, and I'm based all the way from New Zealand. In my professional capacity, I am a communications advisor. I work within community engagement and outreach. And on the side, I also do a lot of content creation, mainly on TikTok, talking about divorce and travel and various other things. A lot of my work on there is around showing up authentically as we are.
Lovely. I know I noticed you, I think, firstly on TikTok. So you do have quite an impression, which I think that, that sort of captured my attention to begin with. What made you sort of like, do sort of content creating, especially on this topic that you just discussed? And we are talking about living after divorce, but you obviously have a variation of things that you discuss with regards to emotional being and, obviously, being in a particular way for the self. So what was your sort of, passion to do that?
Yeah, I think I kind of came across it accidentally, to be honest. I was going through some things. My very first video ended up getting over 900,000 views. And I think from there, I just continued to create content around that topic because I found that in the early stages when I was going through a separation, I couldn't really find anything that where people talked about it quite openly in terms of how you deal with those emotions and how healing is that non-linear process. So I decided to continue to talk about that topic because it seems that it isn't talked about in our communities enough. So yeah, I wanted to share my journey with it in the hope that if it can help one other person feel a little less lonely in that process, then I'm quite happy with what I've done and created.
I think that's really interesting, actually. Now that you mentioned that you wanted to sort of like reach out because you felt that there wasn't any communication, or maybe it was part of your healing to be able to speak. Normally people will do that with their family, with a therapist, and you did it to the sort of wider public. Do you think that's why sometimes when it comes to sharing your journey, do you think someone has to go through their own self-healing before they just go out there? Because a lot of people might just go out and rant or they might complain, or if they're not giving sort of like, some sort of advice or things like that. So what's your thoughts on that? Do you think that it's a safe space to share personal stories, especially something this sensitive? And what's the impact even on maybe your close family members and friends?
Yeah, I think that, like I said, I kind of fell into it accidentally. I did a vlog on the day of my talaq, which I know is not something that people do. But for me, I videoed the process of getting dressed and getting into a car and going to do this because it was a way for me to calm myself down, to relieve that stress and anxiety. It gave me something else that I could focus on. It just so happened that it was my phone and a video. At the end of it, I decided to put that together because I recognized within myself what strength it took to do something like that. And I wanted to put it somewhere where I could always find it. And it just so happened that I created an account on TikTok and put it on there, and then overnight it kind of just turned into something that it is today. So again, I fell into it accidentally. I don't think that everyone would choose to go through it the way that I have, and to deal with it the way that I have. But in saying that, I also did have an entire year from being separated till the actual talaq to kind of go through some of that healing. So what I was showing on my videos was life after that 1 year.
Right. No,
So
that
I
makes
think when
sense.
people are going, yeah, yeah. So when people
I'm
are
just
going
also,
through it,
what
I
was the
think you're right
yeah,
that someone has to heal a bit.
absolutely. No, of course, I was just curious to be honest, because everyone's journey is different. And a lot of people they post, everyday things, but I've never heard of anything like that where someone's, posted their divorce day and how they're going through that. So that is definitely going to be going viral, which it did in your case. And it's really interesting. What was the response to that? Like the pros and cons? Did you get any backlash for it? Or was there any positivity from it? And how was that, either way, what was the response?
Yes, I did get a lot of backlash with that, which in hindsight, it should have been expected. But because I kind of went into everything so blindly, I think it helped in that case with dealing with that. I kind of would leave, I kind of left it to kind of do its own thing and just brew for a bit, and sort of process what those comments were and what they were saying and what they meant. But there have been so many positives that have come out from that in terms of being able to connect with other women who are in a similar situation, who are going through this process, who were able to either reach out to me or find a space in which they felt connected to others that are also going through that, where our families and friends can help in this process. If they haven't gone through the divorce, they they're not going to be able to understand the real impact and the emotional turmoil that one goes through within this. So I think it created a sense of community for people and myself.
Absolutely. No, that sounds absolutely incredible. The fact that you were brave enough to do that, and even with the backlash, which I'm actually not surprised about, and I'm sure a lot of that was probably a specific gender as well. But mind you, nowadays it could be either, because in our faith, I
Yeah.
mean, of course there's a lot of guidelines and there's a lot of things that are happening today which we are not used to, but with time we have progressed, especially in social media, and everything is out there, and sometimes it can be looked upon as a negative, but I look at it as a learning and as an awareness, because like you said from the beginning, our community is very still sort of limited in what they speak about and what they feel they should speak about, and a certain sort of like I don't know, guidelines to it, and there's nothing specific to it. But I know that, you've done it with your intention of, wanting to create a community and just sharing your journey because you were anxious at that moment, and that's what you had and that's what you used. So that's really incredible. Actually, I didn't actually know that. I've seen some of your content, but I actually missed that one, the most important one. So tell me about living after divorce. I mean, I know they say statistically it's always the women that initiates, like as if to say they're the ones that's the cause of it. And I want to clarify this, just because women initiate the actual divorce, because maybe they've just come to a point. I'm not talking about your case specifically because I don't know about that, but I'm saying generally, statistics over here do say that women generally initiate divorce, but it doesn't mean that they are the cause of it as well. It means that maybe they've put up for years. It means that they've, probably fed up, or, they had to take that step. But sometimes it's translated as in, we are the cause now of divorce as females, especially in the society. So what is your thoughts about living with divorce? And usually they also say that, women especially know that the breakup is happened long before they actually verbalize and communicate that. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think that it usually for most people it is the last resort. It happens after you've sort of tried all other avenues, whether they were verbally communicated or not, but most people make that effort to make it work, and then it gets to a point where nothing is working out. And then this happens to be that sort of final resort. And so you're absolutely right. I do think as women, we give it our best. We go through different emotions within it. I think that yes, what does happen is that um, before we get to that stage of initiating that divorce, emotionally we're so drained sometimes that we have already left because we know that it isn't working. So emotionally, we've stopped investing, and then we go, okay, this is absolutely not working anymore, and therefore I must make a choice. And what is that choice going to be? So
That's
yeah, I
true.
think it does
We're
happen
going to
long before.
continue this conversation, Sajida, because I think you've actually, touched on something extremely important. And thank you for answering that question because you made it very clear as well, because I did want to clarify that. But we are coming on to our first break in this episode. Please do stay with us as we have so much more to divulge into. And I've only just started with Sajida right now. So please stay tuned and please do join us when we do come back, as we will be discussing more about this very fascinating story and this amazing woman who is all the way from New Zealand, just tonight only. So please do join us after a very short break. Take care. Salam. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. I'm Fahima Mohammed here with the wonderful Sajida Albi, all the way from New Zealand, talking about living after divorce. And at the beginning, she shared with us how she even posted her divorce day on TikTok with it going viral. And actually that was her source of, healing for, trying to get over the day being, so much anxiety and, trying to just deal with it. And it was something that just continued with her creating content on this particular topic, especially. So, Sajida, when it comes to living with divorce or living after divorce, a lot of people really assume that you can't live after divorce, and especially the initial stages. And like we mentioned even before that, that kind of divorce kind of happens even before the actual, day itself, where that, it's a very much lead up to it, whether it's months or years. So how is the initial stages? I know it's, obviously quite different for most people, but what's the general consensus from, people that you actually come across that you see some sort of like similarity, so that whoever's, going through it, they might resonate and understand that this is okay, this is normal. So what are those stages?
Yeah, I think the early stages of it is grief, is processing that grief. And that's the only term that I've been able to identify it as, because it is a heartbreak. It is pain that I don't think people realize. that it happens. So it's kind of the pain that I've never felt before. But going through it, you can get through it. In those early stages,
Sorry,
it
but do you think
feels
it's
like
the
this is
same
it.
for someone who initiates divorce or someone who is just going through it because they've been forced to it? Do you think those stages are different for people that are actually initiating or the one that's receiving it?
I think those stages happen for both, where but depending where on the timeline it happens may be different. But um, for somebody who does initiate divorce, I think they still go through that grief because at the end of the day, it is grieving the loss of the person from your life, the routine in the life that you built. It's grieving the loss of a relationship. It's grieving the loss of a future together. So something that happens subconsciously where we build an entire life with somebody because we know that marriage is meant to be forever. So we build an entire lifetime in our head, in our subconscious with this person, till death do you part, sort of thing. And so it is breaking all of those dreams and hopes and aspirations you had in that lifetime with that person as well. So it's grieving the loss of that too. And I think that's something that doesn't really get highlighted or talked about enough because it's something that can't be seen, obviously.
Right.
Where the absence of a person in your life you can see, the dreams and hopes of that future is something that's unseen.
What would be the first things
Yeah,
that you
so
would advise someone who's going through divorce? Do you think that they should have, you know, a lot of family, friends support? Should they seek professional advice straight away? You know, what's your kind of sort of thoughts on that?
yeah, I think everyone deals with it differently. What has worked for me, and I think is very important, is to feel your feelings. And you might think, well, how are we meant to just kind of do that? And I think it's really important to sit with yourself and allow yourself to cry and grieve and go through that. Because if that isn't processed, those feelings sit there and they continue to come back over and over again because our emotions and our feelings demand to be felt, to be validated, to then have that natural process of letting go. So in the early stages, no matter how hard it is, um, sit with yourself and let it out. Like if you need to cry, cry about it. It's absolutely okay to do that. No matter how angry you might be in that stage and you think that, oh, I want to forget and move on, that is great. Crying about it is still a process of moving on. And I think I want to highlight that a lot because in some of our cultures and in society, I think that crying is seen as such a weakness, whereas that's kind of how I see as our soul's way of healing. And it's a natural thing to go through. So it is absolutely okay to sit there and cry about something devastating that's happened to you.
Absolutely. No, I second that, especially knowing so much about neuroscience myself, and tears are one of the emotional expressions, and it actually does help you feel better. So even it's a biological sort of relief and release if you are going to do that. So even from a science point of view, definitely that is something that we would urge. Just go through it and you'll feel so much better and so much you know, less, you know, lighter and things like that. There is obviously the grief, and there's the you know, the anger and things like that, but I think also we do feel guilty, right, when you're going through the divorce, whether you initiate it or whether you're the other party that has no choice, and especially if there's children involved. And I think that certain cases do need that separation in a lot of the times. But with that, you still feel that guilt. So how do you overcome that? Because I think that's what a lot of people really find and struggle with. And I don't think sometimes the community and cultures, and especially even, you know, misinterpreting our faith to know that we need to have patience and keep working. But then there is a point and there's a cutoff and there's a boundary there. So people don't understand that you have reached that line, you have reached that boundary. So, you know, enough's enough. Let me make this choice and move on, and I don't need to be reminded and feel more and more guilty and dwell on that. So, what is that guilt and how do we overcome that guilt?
Yeah, I think you've touched on it perfectly. There is so much guilt there, with our culture and culture using it as religious guilt. I do want to highlight that, there is a common misinterpretation that divorce is haram, which it isn't. And there's a lot of the times our culture, people within that culture use that to manipulate people into staying longer than they should, or that you need to put up with a certain amount of where it needs to get to a certain point before you should be able to say no, it's no longer working. And sometimes that means that we excuse abuse.
Yes.
So it's okay to say this isn't working before it even gets to that stage. And so yes, there's a lot of guilt that does come into it. I think that the one thing that helped me to overcome that guilt was accepting that this is what's happened, um, and that nothing happens without the will of Allah. So I think that when we tie our religious understanding in with that, it helps us to accept what has happened and then to overcome the guilt that we feel with that. It is a long process.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What about your ex-partner? Do you feel that there needs to still be communication? There still needs to be some sort of cordial behavior between the two of you, regardless of how that ended? I'm not talking about extreme cases of abuse and things like that, just the normal. So how do you see that? Because, normally when families do split, it's not, sorry, when couples do split, it's families that split, it's friends that split, it's so much that you lose. It's not just that one person. It's like, a whole community sometimes can abandon you. And how do you sort of see that? Because I do feel that, that's the old way of doing things. Nowadays, couples that are not together anymore, they can still be friends. They can still actually be cordial. And especially when there's children involved and their lives are still going to intertwine, as well as, families can and relatives, extended relatives can still be in communication in a civil manner. Obviously, they're not going to do things like they did before, but even if it was privately, they've had those sort of like, one-on-one sort of, close relationships, because at the end of the day, children are still, related as well. So how do you think about that? Do you think it should be complete split, no communication, extended family and friends, completely cut off? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the first thing is that we can't control the actions of other people. All that we can do is control how we behave and how we respond to things. So I think that helps, especially in the early stages. I think it can be very hard when your family and friends still have communications with the other party when you are going through so much and they know that you're going through so much. And that's normal to feel abandoned or angry about that. But I think it's come to accept that we can't control how others react to things. We can't control who they talk to and who they don't talk to. But in terms of what you've asked, yes, absolutely, you can remain cordial with the other party. You can still end things in a harmonious way. And I'm not saying that that applies to all situations. Some people might feel that, yes, absolutely zero communication is the way that I want to go through with this because that is my way of healing and that is okay. But yes, it's absolutely also okay that if you did bump into members of your ex-family, ex-husband's family, that you can still say salam, and that is that you may not have the same sort of communication that you did before, but you don't have to have your fists out when you meet in public.
No, that's so true. And I think it's so important that we address that, because when we talk about divorce, we only talk about the couple and mainly sometimes bring in the children, but actually the extended family and friends have got part of your lives as well. And they shouldn't really have sort of like, some sort of like fuel to the fire as well, to say, just because something like that's happened, to make it even worse. And they can still be the voice of reason and keep it cordial, because I think it's really important that we still have our own family support. But if you were to, like you said, bump into, your ex's family or whatever, and even if you were close to them, for some sort of relationships, it can remain. It may not be very much at the beginning. It could maybe down the line, but don't close that door completely. It doesn't need to be that way, because like I said, the children are still relatives of both sides, especially when, like I said, if there's children involved. It is so complicated, more than we realize. But again, we are coming on to another break. Please do stay with us, as we are going to be discussing this in even more detail, with much more questions. And inshallah, we will hope to even hear from you, whatever you have, any of your comments and queries. We're happy to take them, and I can even read them out anonymously. But again, stay with me. Don't go anywhere. I look forward to seeing you in a few moments. Inshallah, see you shortly. Take care. Assalamu alaikum, and welcome back to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. Having a really, really lovely conversation with my lovely guest all the way from New Zealand, Sajida. Now, we have obviously addressed divorce so many times, and you know what? I don't think it's enough to actually give it some real justice. And you've obviously highlighted some points that I never had a chance to even highlight before, because everyone's perspective is different. And everyone's coming to give some sort of inside information, because at the end of the day, everyone's case is different. So we're not going to obviously tackle it in just one episode. We're going to have loads of guests and loads more on the same topic as well in the future. So please keep watching, please keep taking note. We never know that, at the end of the day, someone might be going through this, or you might know of somebody, or just to be prepared. And I know a lot of us in the past as well, I've sat amongst people where they say you shouldn't really be planning for divorce, because you should have faith in Allah, and you should have trust. And I agree with that 100%. But at the same time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has also given us knowledge, knowing that life is never going to be permanent, nor is it perfect. And it doesn't mean that you have to be some sort of like boss babe and, have it all and do it all. But even if it's not about divorce, your partner could pass away. There could be an accident. It could be anything from both sides. And especially as women, as much as the men are the providers, we also need to be prepared for certain things like this. As much as there's the mahar, as much as there's, the dowry, whatever it is. But when it comes to divorce, just like with anything, it's not given, and the rights are not necessarily going to be there. And it's not even enough for you to move forward. Now, going through this yourself, would you even advise women who are looking to get married to actually secure themselves? They can even have someone who's providing for them, but they also need to secure themselves in some way, because when this hits, sometimes that can delay that divorce and make them stay in it when they shouldn't, even if it's abusive. Or they can be stuck where they really are worse off than what they were, because finance is important. And as much as we have trust, we have to be practical about what this life is. And, we don't just sit there and have things fall in our laps. We have to work for it in everything. It's just as much as this. So I really do think that, when people say that, they're a little bit naive, and they have to actually understand that life happens and it doesn't happen perfectly. So how would you advise, young people now that are, or anyone for that matter, that's going into a marriage, not preparing for divorce, but knowing that sometimes these things will happen, and how would you prepare for the negative?
Absolutely. I think that you hit the nail with that one, where we get told if we are preparing for divorce, or we're taking precautions, that we're saying it will happen, but that's not the case. It's definitely wise to prepare for all situations and all scenarios. It's important that we understand what our rights are, not only the ones that are given to us through Islam, but also the legal rights that we have within the countries in which we live in. And I think that that is probably key into understanding how this entire process will then affect you, because the legal boundaries in which you live in can heavily determine the impacts then that you will have going through this entire situation. In terms of securing yourself financially, yeah. I did a video around mahar, and what is a reasonable figure in terms of that. And I know that's quite a heavy topic to go into. But I came at it from an angle of if things were to go wrong, you need to prepare for at least 3 months of income to survive on. And that 3 months of income would be, you know, for providing a roof over your head, meals, all of those things until, you know, your inter period is over and until you are able to move on to something that is a little bit more normal for you. So what I would have suggested was, you know, you need to realize if something happens and you're on your own in the middle of the night, you've been asked to leave, you and you are lucky enough to have a car and a job, which not everyone is. So where would you go? And how would you prepare for that? And I say take into calculation, you know, the current market, like the rental market that you live in currently. How much would it take for you to get a house on your own? You know, that includes the bond, the rent in advance, all of those things. And if you're living in a country where there is a housing crisis, take that into account too. You might have to be forking out money on a motel, not a good one, and it might not be very safe. And it depends also on what social services are available to you. So yes, I think definitely do your research around what is available to you in the country that you live in. Not only what is available to you within your Islamic boundaries and rights, but also what is available to you in the countries that you live in. Yeah.
That's true. I think we've never really addressed that properly. And a lot of people say, we shouldn't get married, asking for so much dowry. But actually, when you're looking at it in practical terms, I mean, you're quite easy saying 3 months. I would say at least 1 year, especially if the man is the complete provider. Because, it will take you a while to even build yourself. Because a lot of women that say that, they're like, oh, we need these men that are just providers and we need to stay at home. Okay, fine. So if things go wrong, not just because of their cheating or, divorce, but if they even ill or if, like I said, they pass away, what are you going to do? This is the reality,
Mhm.
right? So I think we need to take that into consideration when it comes to the mahar. And believe me, that is only also if the man is going to be willing to pay for it, because that sometimes doesn't even come through the way you think. And that's another sort of episode with another sort of topic in itself, as like we have these Islamic rights, but they're not necessarily fulfilled in time of divorce. So as much as we think we are protected, we're not necessary. And these women need to wake up who speak like that, saying, we shouldn't be demanding and we shouldn't be this and we shouldn't be that, because I deal with the other side of it with my clients, knowing that they have been thrown out of the house, that locks have been changed, even with their kids, and they don't necessarily have family support. They've never worked. So where do they go? Right. So, I get really sort of passionate and I do get my back up about this because women don't know what they're talking about because they're coming from their like little, utopia kind of life themselves. Whereas I see things from many perspectives and a lot of it is the negative, which is actually reality and what's happening now. So I'm really glad that you said that. And I'm really appreciative that you actually put that out on your sort of content as to what we need to seek out and do, because, at the end of the day, it's not preparing for the failure, but at the end of the day, we have to prepare for sometimes what's the negative that may come. And it's just to secure you and your kids. Now, moving on, having to deal with divorce anyway is such an emotional way. But if you don't have the finances, obviously it's going to add to it. How important it is for community to be supportive, not just family and friends, but society, because when you are walking out as a divorced woman, going into the mosque and going anywhere, people look at you differently. You don't get the same invites. You don't get the same friends anymore. Forget even people that you're close to. The ones that you're close to, they're not close to you anymore. What about your married friends? They don't even invite you anymore, right? They might for the beginning, but after a while it does die out. Let's be real. I'm going to be real. There's no hiding over here in my show. So you tell me, what is that like and what should people do and learn? That if you see someone who's like that, do you stay away from them? Are they intimidating you? Do you think that they're going to bring you bad luck to your home? What is it in our community that we need to wake up and change?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's unfortunate that we're in 2023 and divorce is still taboo and within many of our communities. It's still there's still so much stigma around it. it is almost as if, and I'm talking for women specifically, is that we're meant to hide away and not show our face in society again until we have secured another man that will marry us. That the only way that we can be out in society and in communities and live the way that we want to live is if we get married again. But as a divorced woman, it's almost seen as if those rights are no longer ours, that we don't get to just continue on with our lives and be happy in it and be fulfilled in it and have a purposeful life after going through divorce. And in terms of community, there's absolutely, when you're living in a smaller society or smaller Muslim community, you're bound to bump into people from your previous life. You're bound to bump into people who know sometimes more about you than you know yourself. Let's face it, our communities run on a lot of gossip, and when it comes to separation and divorce, that sort of news travels very fast. Everyone knows your business, everyone knows what's happened. And I think that a lot of women, because of the response that we receive when we do go out back into the community, go to our local mosques or wherever, um, for a lot of women, it's just easier not to go out there again because of the kind of backlash or the responses you get from people. And it's not necessarily that sometimes people are outright coming out and saying abusive things to you, but sometimes those silences speak louder than words. It's walking into a room and having the entire room go pin drop silent, and seeing people's reactions.
No, absolutely. Those nonverbal communication and cues are the worst. And the facial expressions and the kind of gestures, they are definitely, definitely much more hurtful as well. Now, we also get, and I hear this a lot as well, when women especially, we never hear this much from men. It's like, especially now, there's so many women coaches and they're talking about, building relationships, and they've come from, the experience themselves of being divorced, for example. But it's like, oh, I wouldn't take advice from someone who's divorced. Is divorce really a failure? It's just an experience and it's a learning like everything else. But no, if you're divorced, and it comes mainly from the Muslim community, because I know I've had this backlash myself, being on different platforms, and oh, because you're divorced, that's it, you're tainted. And it's mainly Muslims that are saying this to other Muslims. Like, they have absolutely no idea that that's how it is. Now, this is a really heated topic and it's getting even more heated, but we are coming onto another break very soon. And I do want to touch this even more so as to your thoughts. When someone's divorced, they're not necessarily, gone through something where they haven't actually learned. If anything, they've actually gone through an experience that someone new has never actually gone through, and they're more likely to come out with a little bit more wisdom. So don't knock that person down for that experience, and don't make it like as if it's a failure. Because sometimes that party, whatever the reason for it, doesn't matter. It just means that two people, have that experience, and more likely they are going to grow, learn, and develop. And you only learn through challenge and adversity. So if you think that you are, sort of stainless and sort of flawless, perfect in that way, no, that's not you having much wisdom then. So we're going to go into this a little bit more when we come back, as we are coming into our final break. Please don't go away. We are only just touching the surface and we've got so much more. Please stay with me as we are going to be back after a very short break. I look forward to seeing you in a few moments. Please stay tuned. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. I do get really passionate about these topics because I do see so many different scenarios and case studies, and we have a lot of emails. We have a lot of people that come to, the show, watching it, and actually, messaging and sending emails. And just generally, I have a lot of case studies that I know myself of these kind of scenarios. So what I'm saying is, unfortunately, the truth and the passion is definitely there, because it's, the suffering that I see, the backlash that I see, and a lot of the hurt that I see. So when I, address these topics, it's really with meaning and purpose so that we can actually be better sort of like people in this world, not just in the Muslim community, but overall, because the only way we're going to really grow is that if we ourselves change and then we filter that in our homes and into society. We can't just, keep bashing people and judging them for one or two things that we see and things that we just know. And we really need to wake up. It's about time we do. Islam used to be at the forefront for so many things in the past. We are lacking behind only because we are not there standing together as unity and as support for one another, and especially in times like this. So, Sajida, what would be your advice to someone who's going through this? Because again, I mean, I think, we've highlighted so much and there's so much blame onto the women. And even if a man gets divorced 10 times, he's never really given the same slack. He's never really given the same sort of like judgment. Even if, he was the one to initiate or he was the one to do it wrong. And we come up with all these statistics and yes, it's our fault, not realizing that, maybe there was some sort of like, continuous behavior that was just not acceptable, for example. So, what is this women bashing, especially in our community, about divorced women, and how is that ever going to stop? Do you have any solutions for that? And it's not just the men that's bashing us. Unfortunately, it's women that are doing it too.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think what upsets me most is when women bash other women, and being on social media and creating content on a platform like TikTok means that I do come across so many comments, and unfortunately, the ones I get that are the most hurtful are from other women. And I think that as a society, what we've deemed as bare minimum for a marriage is is far below it. So we haven't even started to ask for what our rights are, because they somehow are seen as too much, or that we're too demanding for just wanting basic rights. So I think that it's really important that we start to address what is even a bare minimum in a marriage, because that will stop a lot of us from accepting that which is far below the bare minimum as the highest standard. And I think that has what's happened over time. As women, we've been told that we should be grateful if a man picks up a plate, that if a man picks up a plate that he ate from and puts it in the sink, that is the highest pedigree of men you can get. And so we need to stop as women as idolizing these basic acts that are mutual for both, that every human should do, because that is just what is part of being a good human being.
Exactly.
So I think it's that conversation. Yeah.
The other thing, as you were talking about the basic needs, the other thing is a lot of women have even said, because you're divorced, you shouldn't be demanding second time round. And I don't agree with that. And when they say that, I don't exactly know what they mean. Is it because you think that divorced women are second class and, they are at a certain sort of, I don't know, stage and age, or, they are secondhand goods? Is that how you're seeing them? Or are you just thinking that they're demanding because of finance or things like that? But you need to live and you are still of worth and value. So I don't understand that sort of comment. What's your thoughts on that comment when you think that if you're divorced, that means you shouldn't be that demanding and you should accept certain things? If anything, that just sets you up for another fall.
Absolutely. I think divorce teaches you so much. It
Mm-hmm.
teaches you how to handle conflict. It teaches you how to moving on to in life and living a fulfilled life after divorce is extremely hard. And for anyone that's done it, I say pat yourself on the back, because you're doing an incredible job. Because the emotional turmoil that one goes through within that time is enough to just make you not want to like go out and do anything. But then the backlash that we face in our communities, living in the same community or society as the other person, knowing that you will bump into them, that in itself is very difficult. As women, I think a lot of the times we're just expected to carry it all, do it with a smile,
Mm.
and not complain. But I think that we learn so much, and for one, it's absolutely just it's a cultural thing. Our religion doesn't say anything like this. As a matter of fact, the Sahaba and the Prophet married divorcees and widows. So for us to be seen as outcasts of society, as women that are not worth giving a second chance to, is completely wrong from an Islamic point of view. It's completely wrong in just a moral point of view. So
Absolutely.
yeah, we have a lot of work to do, a lot of
Definitely.
work.
And the women that are saying that, you shouldn't be demanding second time around because you are divorcee, they're actually giving more opportunities to certain men who may actually take advantage, saying, well, you're giving us a free reign here by actually saying, women are saying to other women that they are not worthy. They are, below a certain level and degree because of the status of divorce. So that is completely wrong. And I just hope that this show and this, sort of conversation highlights that and we do wake up. And just because someone has made a mistake, even though it's not, or they have had an experience which had gone wrong, just like you do from the time you were born and as adults with many things, not just, in marriage and relationships. And just because you are in a relationship, and I know of plenty, does not mean, even if you're there for years, that you're living in harmony either. So you can't judge that. Okay. So, how would you, as we are coming into sort of like the last parts and a few minutes of the show,
5 minutes.
I just want to thank you for being here. But can you share before I forget towards the end is how do people get hold of you, especially follow you and watch you on your content? Because it sounds really exciting. So share some of your social media sort of like, platforms with us first.
Yeah, so you can definitely follow me on Instagram and TikTok, just using my name, Sajida Albi, and absolutely you can direct message me from there. I also have in my bio my email, which is how you can get a hold of me if you are needing any form of support, advice, or connecting with the community. Or also if you are just needing somebody to come and speak at an event around this topic, that's also where you can get a hold of me.
Yeah, no, amazing. I do urge anyone to follow Sajda, on all her social media platforms, and also if there is any collaborations to definitely invite her. Before we end, as we have got about 3 minutes left, I just want to have you say, have your last words basically for someone who has gone through this, and how would you advise them on the healing journey and some sort of tips and practical ways that, they can move forward if they are going through this right now?
Yeah, I think number one is it is going to be okay. The best pieces of advice that I got right at the beginning, and I hold on to every day, is a friend of mine who told me when I said, I don't know if I'll ever love again or how am I ever going to move forward again. And she said, you will, and you'll put so much more love into yourself. And I am living that today. And it doesn't have to be 10 years before you get to that stage. It doesn't have to take forever. You absolutely can. And I think the number one thing that I've learned through this is to invest in yourself.
Mhm.
Use this as an opportunity to give yourself the life that you always wanted, and you can move forward with new dreams, new hopes, new aspirations. Absolutely. I think it's also really important that you seek help. It's okay to talk to a therapist. Going through this is hard. Trauma lives in our body for ages, right? And we know that, and divorce is trauma. So
Mhm.
talk to it with a professional. As great as it is to talk to your family and friends and vent to them, they are not professionals and they cannot give you professional advice. So please, 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 if you are able to seek help from a therapist, it is absolutely okay to do so. But use this journey as a way of finding you, who you are, what you love, what your hobbies and passions are, and investing more into yourself and loving yourself so much more. Because only when we get to love ourselves, we get to establish the right boundaries. And in the future, maybe we do get to find that happily ever after with somebody truly deserving and worthy of us, who can love us in the right way because we know how to love ourselves. So we're not seeking that external validation from anyone. But yes, I would say follow me if you like. I go on solo travels, and I go on solo dates and give myself everything that that you would want from other people, because that's my happiness is my own responsibility first. So you
Wow.
absolutely can have a very fulfilled life.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing all that information. And definitely, it was such a pleasure to have you today. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Sajida. And really, really, I hope to, collaborate with you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. We had such a wonderful conversation tonight from my beautiful guest, who is lovely inside and out. And, it's not easy to come on here and talk and, share your personal journey and story. And she's done that and so much more, and giving her tips. And this is definitely a topic that, we will revisit again and again. But inshallah, we do, hope to have more topics and guests. And we do appreciate you watching and tuning in and streaming every week. And different next week. Please do stay with us, as we will be back with another episode and topic. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. Have a really, really lovely evening. And inshallah, we will be back. Same time, same place. We hope to see you then. Lovely evening. Assalamu alaikum.